I need to start by telling you what kind of person I am, because it matters. I'm not someone who scares easily. I'm not someone who hears a sound in the middle of the night and lies there catastrophizing until morning. I'm a 38-year-old high school history teacher. I coached junior varsity soccer for 6 years. I own a dog named Biscuit who is, generously, 20% dog and 80% anxiety in a golden retriever's body. I am calm. I am practical. I believe in evidence. I'm telling you this because what I'm about to describe is not the account of a person who was looking for something strange to happen. I was not in a fragile state. I was not grieving or isolated or under unusual stress. I was, by any reasonable measure, a normal person living a normal life. And then something found me in the most ordinary place it could have, my own home, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday night, and nothing has been quite the same since. I bought the house on Pembroke Lane in April, 3 years ago. 2-story craftsman, built in 1947, the kind of house that real estate listings describe as full of character, which is a polite way of saying the floors creak, the windows stick, and you're going to spend your first 2 years discovering all the small, expensive ways it has decided to fall apart. I knew all of that going in. I wanted an old house. I grew up in a new development where every house on the block looked identical, and I always told myself that when I had the money, I'd live somewhere with a past. I got what I asked for. The previous owner was a retired couple who had lived there for 22 years before moving south to be closer to their grandchildren. The wife, Helen Marsh, had left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter when she moved out, a sweet, slightly formal letter welcoming me to the house, telling me which neighbors had dogs that barked and which ones brought Christmas cookies, listing the quirks of the plumbing. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, she had written, "The third step from the top of the stairs creaks badly." I always knew when Gerald was up late. You'll get used to it. I read the note twice. It made me feel good about the house. It made it feel like a place people had loved. I should tell you that the note didn't mention anything else. Whatever Helen Marsh knew or suspected about the house on Pembroke Lane, she chose not to put it in writing. I moved in on a Saturday in April with my brother's pickup truck and the help of 2 of my friends. We were done by 4 in the afternoon. We ordered pizza, sat on the floor of the empty living room, and I felt, in the way you sometimes feel things before your brain has caught up with your life, that something important had shifted. That this was a real beginning. By that night, I had unpacked enough to be functional. Bed frame assembled, sheets on, enough kitchen boxes emptied to make coffee in the morning. Biscuit had done his usual inspection of the entire house, sniffing every corner, every baseboard, and had settled at the foot of my bed, which is where he always settles. Everything was ordinary. I was asleep by 11. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I turned to look at my phone, and that's what it said, 3:17. I had no reason to wake up, no sound I could identify, no bad dream I could remember, just the sudden and complete return to consciousness in a strange room in a strange house. Which can happen, especially the first night somewhere new. Nothing unusual about that. What was unusual was Biscuit. He was standing at the foot of the bed, which was where I'd last seen him, but he was not lying down anymore. He was standing completely rigid, ears forward, body still, staring at the closed bedroom door with the fixed intensity that dogs sometimes use when they see something through a window. A cat in the yard, a passing car. Something worth tracking. I watched him for a moment. He didn't move. I said his name. He didn't turn around. I sat up and listened. The house was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a familiar place, but the held breath quiet of something that is trying not to be heard. I am aware of how that sounds. I'm not sure how else to describe it. The silence had a quality to it, a texture. After about 30 seconds, Biscuit slowly lay back down. He kept his eyes on the door for another minute or two, then put his head on his paws and closed his eyes. I lay back down. I told myself, new house, new smells, new sounds. He was probably hearing the plumbing. Old houses make noise. I was not going to be one of those people who spent their first night in a new home convincing themselves it was haunted. I went back to sleep. I didn't think about it again for 6 weeks. The second time was different. It was a Tuesday in late May. I'd been at school all day, had a staff meeting after classes, stopped at the grocery store on the way home. I got in around 7, fed Biscuit, made dinner, graded papers until almost 11. Normal evening. Nothing out of the ordinary. I went to bed, turned off the light. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Same time. To the minute. I know because I looked. Biscuit was standing at the foot of the bed again, in the same position, rigid, staring at the door. And this time I noticed something I hadn't noticed the first time. Maybe because I'd been half asleep. Maybe because this time the moonlight through the curtain was stronger. His hackles were up. Biscuit has never been an anxious dog in that particular way. He barks at the mailman. He loses his mind when he sees a squirrel. But in 8 years, I've never seen his hackles raise. That is an involuntary, physical response. That is the body reacting to something it identifies as a genuine threat. I sat up in bed and I listened. The house was making that same quality of silence. And then I heard it. The third step from the top of the stairs, creaking once, slowly. The exact creak Helen Marsh had described in her note. I recognized it because I'd stood on that step myself half a dozen times in the weeks since I moved in. It has a particular sound, lower and longer than the other steps. You can't mistake it. One creak, then nothing. I sat completely still. Biscuit was still standing, still rigid, still staring at the door. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't panic. It wasn't what I'd expected fear to feel like. It was something colder than that, a kind of clarity, where everything sharpens and your brain starts making very quick and very rational calculations. Someone is in the house. That step is 3 steps from the top. If they came in from downstairs, they've climbed most of the staircase. The bedroom door is closed. There's a lamp on the nightstand I can use as a weapon. I got up, slowly. Picked up the lamp, pulled the cord from the socket. Crossed to the door. Opened it. The hallway was empty. The staircase was empty. I could see it clearly. The moonlight from the hallway window was strong enough to illuminate every step. Nothing there. The third step from the top looked exactly like it always looked. I went downstairs. I went through every room. I checked the front door, locked, deadbolt thrown. Back door locked. All the windows. I went through the whole house with the lamp in one hand and my phone in the other, ready to call 911. Nothing, no one. I stood in the kitchen for a while. Biscuit had followed me downstairs and was standing close to my leg, which he sometimes does when he's uncertain. I gave him water, I gave myself water, and I stood there in my kitchen at 3:30 in the morning trying to decide what to think. Old houses creak. Temperature changes cause wood to expand and contract. The step could have creaked for any number of reasons. The fact that I'd heard it, been awake to hear it, was perhaps simply coincidence. I went back to bed. The following Tuesday, I woke up at 3:17. I want to tell you the exact sequence of what I discovered, because the order matters, and because I've thought about it enough that I know which parts changed my understanding, and which parts only confirmed what I already knew. The third Tuesday was when I started paying attention. I woke at 3:17. Biscuit was at the foot of the bed. The step creaked once. I lay still this time instead of getting up, and I listened, and after the creak there was nothing, no footsteps, no sound of movement, no indication that anything was climbing toward my floor. Just the one creak. Then the quality of silence that I had already begun to recognize. It lasted, that silence, for what I estimated was about 4 minutes. And then it released, in the way that the pressure in your ears releases when you descend in an airplane. A subtle shift. And the house sounded like a house again. Biscuit lay down. I lay awake until morning. The next day I wrote down what I knew. I am a history teacher. I believe in documentation. The facts were, I had woken at exactly 3:17 a.m. on 3 separate Tuesdays. On each occasion, Biscuit had been standing rigid at the foot of the bed. On each occasion, I had heard the third step from the top of the stairs creak once. On no occasion had I found any evidence of an intruder or any physical cause for the sound. It wasn't enough to draw conclusions from. I knew that. 3 data points in 6 weeks, and I was already a teacher who'd spent years telling students to be skeptical of patterns they wanted to find. I decided to wait. I didn't have to wait long. The following Tuesday at 3:17, the same sequence. The Tuesday after that. 7 Tuesdays in a row, not a single one missed. Always 3:17. Always the step. By the 7th week, I had stopped getting up. I just lay still and listened through the 4 minutes of that particular silence, and when it ended, I'd lie awake for a while and eventually go back to sleep. I had also started recording. I set up my phone on the nightstand pointed at the door, audio running. 7 weeks of audio files. In all of them, you can hear the creak, clear, unmistakable, exactly where the step is, and then nothing, silence. And then, faintly, at the end of the 4-minute window, a sound I had not noticed before when I was listening in real time. A sound like breathing. Not from inside the room. Not close. From the hallway, through the closed door, faint enough that I'd missed it, but there on the recording if you turned the volume up and listened carefully. Slow and even and quiet. I listened to that recording 11 times. Then I called my friend Danny. Danny is a police detective. Not locally. He works in a city about 2 hours from where I live, so he has no jurisdiction and no professional stake in what I tell him. He's also the most skeptical person I know, which is exactly what I needed. I told him everything, the times, the Tuesday pattern, the step, the recordings. He listened without interrupting, which is unusual for Danny. When I was finished, he said, "You've changed your locks since you moved in." I had. First week. Anyone with a grudge, anyone who might know the layout of the house. No one came to mind. Send me the audio. I sent him 3 of the recordings. He called back 2 hours later. He said, "The breathing is real." I had someone else listen. "It's real." I asked him what he thought it was. He said, "I don't know. But you should put a camera on that staircase." I put 4 cameras up that week. 1 on the stairs, 1 in the upstairs hallway, 1 covering the front door, 1 in the kitchen facing the back. All of them networked to a service that stored footage remotely. I bought a proper alarm system for the doors and windows. I did everything right. The following Tuesday at 3:17 a.m. I woke up and I opened the app on my phone to watch the staircase camera in real time. The step creaked. The camera showed nothing. I rewound the footage from the moment before the creak. I watched the staircase, empty, clear, every step visible in the infrared. I watched the exact moment the creak happened on the audio. The stair looked exactly like a stair. Nothing on it. Nothing moving. I called Danny in the morning. He was quiet for a while after I told him. Then he said, "Marcus, I have to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as a person who does not believe in things he can't explain." I told him to go ahead. He said, "I've been asking around quietly about your address. There's nothing in our system, no calls, no incidents. So I called the county assessor's office to get a full ownership history, because that's public record. You want to know what I found?" I said yes. The Marshes bought the house in 2001. Before them, it was a family named Delacroix, 9 years. Before that, a woman named Patrice Howell, 4 years. Before that, he paused. There's a gap. Between 1987 and 1993, the house was owned by the county. It had been seized. The original owner died intestate, no will, no heirs, and it sat in county inventory for 6 years before it was auctioned. I asked him who the original owner was. Man named Raymond Carr. Bought the house in 1961, lived there until he died. Died in April 1987. Another pause. Marcus, the county death record, lists the time of death as 3:22 a.m. I didn't say anything. He died in the house. They found him at the bottom of the stairs. Medical examiner ruled it a fall. He was 71, lived alone, probably missed a step in the dark and went down the whole staircase. Danny let that sit for a moment. "Third step from the top," he said. That would be the one he missed. I need to tell you what happened next carefully, because this is the part that I find the hardest to talk about. It was a Thursday, not a Tuesday. I want to be clear about that because it matters. An ordinary Thursday evening in late September. I had papers to finish grading. I was tired. I went to bed around 10 and fell asleep quickly. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Biscuit was not at the foot of the bed. He was in the corner of the room, behind the door, pressed against the wall in a way I had never seen him behave. When I turned on the bedside lamp and looked at him, he was shaking. I sat up. The bedroom door was standing open 6 inches. I had closed it when I went to sleep. I always closed it. Biscuit knew to stay on his side of the door. It was the only way to keep him from waking me up at 5 in the morning to go out. The door was open, and the step had not creaked. I sat completely still and listened. No sound. No particular quality of silence, no sense of pressure. Just the ordinary quiet of a house at night. The door was open. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that my eyes adjusted fully. Long enough to be certain the room was empty. Then I got up and crossed to the door and opened it all the way. The hallway was empty. I looked at the staircase. There was a man standing at the top of the stairs. He was facing away from me. He was short, heavy-set, wearing what looked like a dark robe or a heavy cardigan, something voluminous and dark. He was standing completely still, right at the edge of the top step, and he was facing down the staircase. I did not move. I did not breathe. He did not move either. I want to be precise about what I saw, because I have gone over it many times since. He was solid. He was not translucent, not flickering, not in any way ambiguous. He looked like a person standing in my hallway. The hallway light was off, but the moonlight through the window at the end of the hall was strong, and I could see him clearly. Short, heavy, dark clothing, standing at the top of the stairs. I said, "Hey." My voice came out wrong, too loud in the silence, and cracked slightly in the middle of the word, which I am not proud of. But I said it. The man did not turn around. He did not move at all. And then, slowly, so slowly that I at first thought I was imagining it, he began to lean forward. Just slightly, the way a person does when they're about to take a step. I lunged forward and grabbed for his shoulder. My hand went through him. Not through empty air. Not through nothing. I felt, and I have thought about how to describe this dozens of times, because I know how it sounds. I felt a cold resistance, like putting your hand into very cold water, and then my hand was through it, and there was nothing there. I stumbled forward. My shoulder hit the wall. I caught myself on the railing. The top of the stairs was empty. I stood gripping the railing at the top of a dark staircase in the middle of the night, looking down at the steps below me, breathing so hard I could hear it. Biscuit was in the corner behind the bedroom door, still shaking. I took a week off school. I told my department head it was a family matter. I stayed at my parents' house 40 minutes away, slept in my childhood bedroom, and tried to think clearly about what I had seen. I'm a rational person. I have always been a rational person. I believe that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I believe that the human brain is profoundly capable of producing false perceptions under stress, in darkness, in the ambiguous territory between sleep and waking. I know all of this. I held it up against what I had seen. And the problem I kept coming back to, was that I hadn't been half awake. I hadn't been drowsy and uncertain. I had been fully, completely awake. I had walked across a room, opened a door, stood in a hallway. I had said a word out loud. I had moved my body and felt cold resistance and stumbled into a wall. Walls are solid. I know because I hit one. I called Danny and told him what had happened. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Marcus, I have to ask you something directly. Is there any chance at all, that you were sleepwalking?" I thought about it honestly. Sleepwalking is real. People do things while sleepwalking that they have no memory of. I have no history of it, but that doesn't mean it can't start. The wall, I said. I can feel the bruise on my shoulder from hitting the wall. Danny didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I know." He paused again. "Patris Howell," he said. "The woman who lived in the house between the Delacroix family and the Marshes. I tracked her down. She's in a care facility in Raleigh now. She's 80, but she's sharp. I told her I was looking into the history of a property for an investigation. I stretched the truth a little. I asked him what she said. She said she left because of the stairs. She said something stood at the top of the stairs. She said she grabbed for it once. He stopped. She said she felt cold. Danny let that sit for a moment. She said she moved out the following week. She said she never went back. She said, "Marcus," she said it was always on a Tuesday. And it was always around the same time. I asked him what time. She didn't remember exactly. She said it was the same time every week, right around 3 in the morning. I went back to the house. I know how that sounds, but I want to be precise about why. I wasn't brave. I wasn't being foolish. I went back because it was my home, and because whatever was in it had been there for decades and had never, as far as I could determine, hurt anyone. Patris Howell moved out. Helen Marsh lived there for 22 years. I needed to understand that gap. 22 years and Helen Marsh hadn't put a single word in her welcome note about a man at the top of the stairs. I called her. Her number was easy to find. She'd left it in the note. She picked up on the third ring, and I introduced myself and apologized for the unexpected call, and there was a brief pause before she said, "Is it the house?" She knew immediately. I hadn't said anything, and she knew. I told her yes. Helen Marsh was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Gerald used to see him too in the beginning. The first year or two. Always on Tuesday nights. Always at the top of the stairs." I asked her why she hadn't told me. She said because he stopped. After about 2 years, Gerald stopped seeing him. And I never saw him at all. And we lived there 22 years, perfectly happily. I didn't want to frighten you away from a house you deserved to love. She paused. Gerald thought he was just checking, she said. That was his theory. He thought the man was just checking to make sure it was safe. Making sure whoever was coming down the stairs wouldn't fall. Checking the step. I asked what she meant. He died falling down those stairs, she said quietly. Gerald always thought maybe he was just trying to warn people. Show them where it was dangerous. Stand there so you'd see him and know not to come that way in the dark. I didn't know what to say to that. You should leave a light on, she said. On the staircase, the one on the wall by the third step. Gerald started leaving it on at night, and after a while, the man stopped coming. It was like, once the step was lit, he could rest. She paused one more time. He was a good man, I think. Raymond Carr. He just didn't want anyone else to fall. That was 2 years ago. I left the staircase light on. A small lamp, plugged into a socket halfway up the wall, angled toward the third step. I have left it on every night since. For 4 months after I installed it, I woke at 3:17 every Tuesday and lay still and listened. No creak. No breathing. No silence with that particular quality. By the 5th month, I stopped waking up at 3:17. Biscuit sleeps at the foot of the bed. He has not pressed himself into a corner since that September night. He has not stood rigid and staring at the door. He is, again, 20% dog and 80% anxiety about things like thunderstorms and the veterinarian, which is appropriate. I still hear the third step creak sometimes, during the day, when I'm walking upstairs after school. It's a loose board. It's always going to be a loose board. I've thought about fixing it, and I've always decided against it. I don't know what Raymond Carr was, or what it means that something of him remained in that house for decades, standing at the top of the stairs he fell down. I don't know what I grabbed for in that hallway, or what the cold was, or whether what Patrice Howell and Gerald Marsh and I saw was the same thing or 3 different versions of our own fear, given shape by an old house and a dark stairwell. But I know what Helen Marsh said. He just didn't want anyone else to fall. I've decided to take that at face value. I've decided that whatever is in this house has had decades to do harm and has chosen, consistently, not to. That it stood at the top of a staircase every Tuesday night to mark the place where a man's life ended, and that when I gave the step enough light to be seen clearly, it was satisfied. I don't know if that's the right interpretation. I don't know if interpretation is even the right framework. But I leave the light on. Every night. I will leave it on for as long as I live in this house. And sometimes, walking up to bed at the end of a long day, I put my hand on the third step from the top, gently, the way you'd touch something fragile, and I say, I see it. I'll be careful. I don't know if that's enough. But so far, nothing has come back. And on the good nights, The nights when I fall asleep quickly and sleep all the way through, and Biscuit snores at the foot of the bed, and the old house settles and creaks the way old houses do, all of it ordinary and small and mine. On those nights, I think I understand what Helen Marsh's husband understood. Whatever stayed behind in this house, it wasn't malice. It was just someone who didn't want to leave a dangerous thing in the dark. And maybe that's the closest thing to peace a person can find when they are not a person anymore. Maybe that's all any of us would want.